So you're thinking about building a room addition. Well, I'm Jason Avery with Avery Construction, and I'm here to explain to you today how the value of a home addition works. A lot of people seem to have an unrealistic expectation about the costs of construction, so I'm going to try to disband any of the rumors you've heard and give you some real information that you can use so you can plan and budget this project to be a success. So, first thing about building a room addition, many people get the idea that they might want to go up. Maybe they're limited on property size. What they don't realize, though, is that when you take the roof off of the house, you took off all of your insulation, you took off all of your electrical wiring, you took off all of your air conditioning ductwork, and all the shingles and much more. So it's an entire gut job, and now the rains in Florida are never going to yield enough time to put the thing back together, so everything below is getting wet and soaking. You're pretty much rebuilding the entire interior of the house, and it requires you to completely move out of the house, obviously for safety and security. So the best option in any room addition is to build outward, and this doesn't affect your lifestyle. You can still live in the home while the construction ensues, and with little interruption in your regular lifestyle. Additions going out off the side of the house could be limited by the setbacks of the yard. Often we find them 7 to 10 feet from the property line that the roof overhang cannot exceed, so back the wall up a foot from that. In the rear of a home, typically you can go 20 to 25 feet set back from the property line to the roof overhang. So if you have this space in your yard and you want to build on, this is possible, and I'm going to explain to you how to build up the cost for that. When building a room addition, in the old days, they would advertise $90, $100 a square foot for raw construction. That was to build an entire house, though. And to build a house these days tends to be about 4,000 square feet or more, and that finished price, when you use modern materials and energy-efficient options, that's coming in somewhere near $300 to $320 a square foot. That's for the entire house. Now, when you try to build just a small piece of a house, a 600 square foot addition, 1,000 square foot addition, you're not building an erector set on a blank slate of land. We first have to have the materials delivered and then hand cart them out to the rear of the home. When concrete arrives, we can't just dump it in the hole. We have to rent a pump and pump it all the way into the backyard. We can't just start building our erector set. We have to first maybe undo and tear apart some of the existing home in order to make this married together. So things like the existing roof overhangs are probably coming off. Maybe you had an existing screen room or slab below that you want to demo first as we now build up. So when building an addition, the raw square footage price for, just the shell, let's start with that 300 a square foot range. But now add to it the demolition to tear back the roof overhangs. And then we may have to add to it the entire roof. How old is that roof? If it wasn't done in the last 5, 7, or 10 years, there's not much hope for trying to tie it in and not end up with a perpetual leaking situation. So ultimately, you might be considering re-roofing the entire house at the same time. The air conditioner tends to support about 500 square feet of house for every 1 ton of air conditioner being possessed. Let's say from 400 to 600, depending on the efficiency of the unit, depending on how much your house is in the sun or shaded by trees, depending on the value of the windows that you have, the single pane or the insulated double pane, and depending on the actual insulation in the walls and the ceiling. So if your air conditioning unit is old, maybe you're going to upgrade it, and then you're going to add additional ductwork to reach the new space that we're trying to cool or heat. If your air conditioner is new and it doesn't make sense to replace it at this point, we're certainly going to probably add a second air conditioner. Mini splits are a common option as the least expensive, but then also there are other full-on units with ductwork that you can buy as well. What about the electrical panel? And if you're getting ready to add additional circuits, 2 big ones for air conditioners possibly, and then what else? Are you doing a kitchen or a bathroom or other utilities inside, or is this just general living space? The electrical panel itself, if it's all full, if there's no extra spaces for new breakers, it's probably going to need to be upgraded as well. At least the panel being swapped out, if not needing to upgrade the amperage coming in from the pole. When it comes to that living space versus kitchens or bathrooms, the raw construction didn't include those extra utilities yet. So, what is it that we're trying to add? Is it going to be just a toilet and a sink? A toilet, a sink, and a shower? A toilet, a sink, a shower, and a tub? Are we adding just a kitchenette or a full-blown kitchen? So all these options are going to impact the total price. If we open up this addition through a doorway that exists, no additional cost there. But what if we have to open up part of the wall? If that was an exterior wall of the home and it was load-bearing, beams may be needed. So as we start to piece all these things together, 1,000 square foot addition at about 300 a square foot could easily add up to $300,000. Most people aren't building quite that much. But that $300,000 wasn't the end of it. Now, if we did a roof, was it another $15,000 to $25,000 for shingles, maybe more for tile and metal? What about the beam in the wall? Was it another, $3,000 for something simple, the size of a doorway, maybe 6 feet? Or is it a 22-foot gap, which now requires wood and steel and some significant demolition and possibly upgrading of your footers? That could be a $25,000 beam. Now, if you're adding that bathroom into the mix, again, the small powder bathroom may add another $3,000 to $5,000 of materials and labor that needs to come along with it. If we're doing the typical hallway bathroom, for the guests, that could be an additional $10,000, $15,000 of materials and labor. What about a master bathroom? It's got a double sink and it's got a shower and a tub. Maybe we're adding another $20,000 or $30,000 in labor and materials. All these things considered can have a great impact on the budget. Even though you are building 1,000 square feet, it may not be finishing at 300 a square foot. It may be finishing at 500 a square foot or 600 a square foot by the time you consider all the things that happened to the existing conditions prior to the actual construction of the building we wanted to make. So maybe this is for you, maybe it's not in your budget. So what's feasible? Can you build a room addition on your property? I would start by going to the local property appraiser's website to look up your property. They should have a link that allows you to determine FEMA or flood zones. If you're located in a flood zone, FEMA has restrictions on the amount of improvements you're allowed to do to the home. The value is probably not going to be justified. You're probably not going to be able to build an addition at all. If you're thinking about building this project using some sort of financing, you're going to have to consider what is the equity within the home that's going to allow that. They're going to give you some allowance possibly for the new construction, but that might tie you into a program called 203K. You're going to find a limited number of contractors that are taking on these programs. Tends to be a little slow in the process of how the contractors get paid out, third-party inspectors involved, banks that don't process fast. They, make sure every I is dotted and T is crossed, and weeks go by without payments coming through. It just throws out the duration of the job. Every project for an addition or anything involving structural elements of your home is going to require an architect and or a structural engineer to be involved. So that person will be hired early in the process. If your addition is going to be complicated in terms of the roof, meaning you've got big hips and valleys and you need to tie into them, you're going to want to hire the architect first before you begin the process of interviewing and shopping with your contractors. There's going to be a lot of details and information that they will need in order to get anywhere near accurate on the price or the budget they're going to give you. If your project is going to be more simple, such as just a flat roof with rafters, this project is very predictable. And I would suggest that you start with interviewing the contractors first, find who you're comfortable with, find a budget that's agreeable, and then the architect gets hired into the process just to put on paper the designs you've already created, the concepts you've already put together for submission into your building permit. When you hire the architect first, it's still not a bad idea to put a retainer down with a contractor and have them involved in the design process. Too often, we see that people go out and design on the plan the addition of their dreams, and then when they hear the final price point, it just doesn't make sense. Now it's back to the drawing board, and it's back to the architect making changes, and that architect is going to continue to charge you for those changes and that design time, and the time that they invest into it is at a premium price point, as opposed to the contractor who's ultimately giving you that design time mostly for free with the commitment that it will end in a project that they'll get to construct for you. Deciding when and who to bring to the table is important, but ultimately I think it's a collaboration that works best. We commonly get requests for an addition that is to be built within an existing space, probably a patio. Now, the differences was that patio constructed out of all aluminum with an aluminum roof? That type of patio is going to be completely torn down and you're building the addition up completely from scratch. If it's the type of patio that has a hard roof, it was walls framed with either 2x4s, 2x6s, or concrete block, or maybe aluminum posts, but then carrying a beam over the top, and then it has a hard roof. A plywood deck with either a rolled roofing product, a shingle, a tile, or a metal. Those types of additions we can build underneath, but here's the key things you need to know. The patio slab was only poured 2 inches thick, and it's on a slope so that the rainwater drains off. That's going to have to be poured up to 4 inches thick, the same level as the rest of the house. If it was a lightweight roof that was on there, the footing may or may not be sufficient for adding on additional weight if we're going to add a big gable over the top of what was flat before. The electrical around the perimeter, it's going to have to be within an outlet within 6 feet of every door, no more than 12 feet between them, and as they span around the room. You're going to have a light switch when you come into the room or going out of the room on either end, the side that goes into the house or the side that goes into the yard. You're going to have that air conditioner. You're going to have glass for your windows. Some of the old porches had some acrylic windows in there, plexiglass type products, and those won't be sufficient. Windows are a huge part of any room addition budget. If you're trying to enclose a porch area and it was mostly all a gigantic view before, to create that view again with all glass as an extreme price point. Each individual window possibly ranging between $1,200 to $1,700 a piece. And that's just so that we can meet the current hurricane codes, provide the right insulation value that are required in today's environment. So most additions, a house priced at 300 a square foot raw construction, is going to have a window maybe on each wall, a couple windows in each room at the maximum. When you're trying to do an entire wall of windows, or possibly glass on top of glass, because they can only be made so high or so wide and past the hurricane ratings. So ultimately, how much glass goes in that room can have a giant impact on the overall price point. So at Avery Construction, we welcome the opportunity to help you build your room addition. If you call us today, we'll set up an appointment and we'll send one of our designers out to your home to assess the field conditions. If you don't have a set of architectural plans yet, please, you could make a pencil sketch on a piece of paper of ultimately what your vision or dream is. We'll study with you what the challenges are, potentially the underground plumbing, or the roof tie-in, or the electrical panel, the AC, all these moving pieces that are going to affect the price point of your addition. Within the first visit, we can tell you within a range approximately what to expect. As we get into the process of hiring an architect or engineer and bringing them to the table, we'll be able to have a very specific line item budget for you. Piece by piece, you'll know exactly where the money goes, and we'll be able to value engineer together where the priorities lie so that your budget and your expectations can find the balance. Most room addition projects are going to take several months to actually break ground. There's going to be at least 6 weeks and maybe up to 12 weeks of engagement with the engineer or the architect to put on paper exactly the specifications of what you want built for a clear submission to the building department. If it's not done clear, you have to resubmit. So selection of that architect is very important, and we know several good architects that we'd be happy to introduce you to. When it comes to submission into the building department, it goes under a review process, and it tends to be anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks to get it through that process and be issued the actual permit. We typically break ground on projects within just a couple of weeks of issuance of the permit, and from that point, it has its various stages. There will be a little stop and go throughout the process as we have to wait and get things inspected before we can move on to the next step. We're also coordinating a large series of different types of trades. It'll start off with digging apart the yard and installing underground plumbing, then moving into concrete with footing and slabs that get termite treatments. It's going to then move into the erection of the walls, whether it's concrete or wood, installation of the trusses, putting in the roof deck, After this is done, we can now start to dry in. That's where we put on the actual roof surface and we put in all the dry in materials, the windows and the doors. Create the secured space before we actually open up the wall that separates the original home from the addition. Once we have the secured space and the wall is open, now we're gonna go gangbusters to the interior. While other professionals finish up stucco, soffit, and fascia outside, on the interior, we're finishing up the roughing of all the wiring for your electricity, all the duct work for the air conditioner, all of the plumbing for any sinks or tubs or faucets. And then we got to get all that inspected. And then we're going to get insulation installed and inspected, then drywall installed and inspected. Then we're going to do the mud and the textures. We're going to paint the surfaces of the interior. And then now we're going to start into the flooring installation, the cabinet installation. We have to do templating and then fabrication and install countertops. And then now we have to do what they call the trim out of your electric and your plumbing and your air conditioning. And then there's a series of final inspections. And of course, always a little bit of a punch out process as we nail down all the little tiny details to make sure we deliver to you exactly the project you were looking for and at the quality that we want to stand behind.